The era of learning is over. The era of doing has begun. I'm Etienne Newman, and on today's Daily News Rundown, Jensen Huang has officially declared the Inference Inflection. With a $1 trillion backlog, the war is no longer about who has the biggest model, but who can deliver the cheapest token at scale. We are deconstructing Samsung's Agentic AI for chip design and the UK's £1 billion quantum shield. If you aren't calculating your AI data debt, you're already behind. Let's dive into the forensics.
Imagine this. It's a Tuesday afternoon. An entry-level analyst at, some Fortune 500 company logs into their brand new, highly touted internal AI chatbot.
Right, the one the executives have been bragging about all quarter.
Exactly. So they type a super casual prompt, something like, hey, can you pull together a summary of our Q3 revenue projections and sort them by the top performing regional directors?
Seems harmless enough.
Yeah, totally standard. It takes like 1.2 seconds. The screen populates with this beautiful, perfectly formatted dashboard.
Naturally.
But underneath the charts, the AI helpfully includes the unredacted performance reviews of those directors and the CEO's private commentary on an impending round of layoffs.
Oh, wow.
And bizarrely, the plain text password to the central HR database from like a forgotten legacy SharePoint file that hasn't been touched since 2014.
Yeah, that's the nightmare scenario.
Right. Within 1.2 seconds, a simple everyday query has triggered a catastrophic multi-level data breach.
Whoa.
Welcome to the era of AI data debt.
It is, without a doubt, the single greatest unpriced risk in the global market right now.
Totally.
And, the truly terrifying part isn't that the machine made a mistake. It's that the machine did exactly what it was engineered to do.
It did it flawlessly.
Flawlessly, yeah. At a speed that human oversight literally cannot intercept.
And that speed, that sort of frictionless execution, is exactly why we are here today. So welcome to the Deep Dive. We are thrilled to have you with us.
Glad to be here.
If you're listening to this, you already know the drill. The landscape of global technology is not shaped by, flashy consumer product launches or conversational avatars or whatever video generator happens to be trending on your social feed today.
No, absolutely not.
It is shaped by silent, tectonic shifts in infrastructure, in semiconductor physics, and national security. Today, we are adopting the high-stakes forensic mindset required of a lead strategic analyst for DjamgaMind.
Because our mission isn't to just sit here and read you press releases. It is to decode the architecture of the next decade. And what's fascinating here is that to decode that architecture, we really have to look past the immediate noise.
The stuff that distracts everybody else.
Exactly. I mean, the mainstream media gets entirely consumed by the front end, what the AI says, how the AI looks.
The shiny wrapper?
Yeah, the shiny wrapper. But as forensic AI architects, our job is to examine the second-order effects of the global intelligence stack. We have to look at the plumbing.
The power grid.
Right, the microscopic silicon pathways that make any of this possible in the first place.
Which brings us to the intelligence dossier you've brought for us today. It is a highly curated, deeply technical stack of developments, and they all converge on a single date.
March 17th, 2026.
Right. We're looking at Jensen Huang's pivotal GTC 2026 keynote in San Jose. We have a groundbreaking hardware alliance between Samsung and Nvidia.
Which is massive.
Huge. Plus a rather dire cybersecurity forecast out of the Gartner Summit in Sydney. We've got a £1 billion UK quantum shield initiative.
And, a flurry of peripheral AI news that might seem unrelated on the surface.
But they aren't, are they?
Not at all.
Yeah.
They actually form this perfect diagnostic X-ray of the global economy right now.
So if you lay all these distinct data points out on a table, what is the picture they make?
They point to one massive interconnected shift. Basically, the laboratory phase of AI is officially over.
The tinkering phase.
Yeah, the last 4 years of running experiments, tweaking parameters, and, marveling at large language models in a sandbox, that era is dead.
We are now violently entering the industrialized, highly vulnerable, and geopolitically contested deployment phase.
Violently is the right word for it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand this industrialized deployment, we absolutely have to start with the hardware event of the year. Jensen Huang's massive 3-hour GTC keynote.
San Jose was packed to the rafters for that one.
Oh, totally sold out. But the core announcement, the thesis that really sets the baseline for our entire briefing today, was this definitive, aggressive pivot from training to inference.
Yes, that's the inflection point.
Now, we know you, our audience, tracks the industry, so we don't need a primer on what a neural network is. But I need you to explain why this specific transition from training to inference is arguably like the most significant economic event of the decade.
Well, it's the defining economic pivot of our time because it represents the shift from capital expenditure to operational revenue.
Okay, break that down for us.
So, for the last half-decade, the entire narrative, and honestly hundreds of billions of dollars of venture and sovereign capital, has been entirely consumed by training.
Right, buying up GPUs.
Yeah, training is this brute force process.
Yeah.
You're feeding mountains of internet-scale data into a massive cluster of GPUs just to teach the model how to recognize patterns.
It requires gigawatts of power.
Gigawatts of power, months of continuous compute. But fundamentally, training is an R&D expense. It's building the engine in the factory.
Got it. So what Jensen Huang declared on stage is that the era of the R&D monopoly is giving way to the era of execution.
Exactly. And execution is what inference is. Inference is the model actually answering a prompt.
Driving a car.
Right, routing a supply chain or generating code in real time.
I always like to think of it this way. Training is like spending billions to build a world-class university.
I like that analogy.
And inference is the moment those millions of graduates actually enter the global workforce and start producing economic value.
That's a great way to put it. And the sheer scale of those digital graduates entering the workforce is staggering.
I mean, Jensen referenced a $1 trillion order backlog.
Extending all the way through 2027. Let that number sink in for a second. That is not $1 trillion of speculative venture capital hoping to build a better model.
Right, it's not a bet on the future.
It's $1 trillion of hardened enterprise commitment to using the intelligence. The Fortune 500, national governments, logistics conglomerates, they are buying the compute to run inference.
But there's a catch, right? There's a bottleneck.
Always. Here is the critical bottleneck. If inference is where the global economy actually executes its daily operations, then the metric that governs the entire global economy is no longer the cost of a barrel of oil.
It's the cost per token.
Precisely, the cost per token.
Meaning the physical cost of generating a single fragment of a word or a pixel or a line of autonomous code.
Right. And if agentic workflows are going to replace standard computing tasks, if you have AI agents chattering to each other, negotiating contracts, rewriting software in the background of every business continuously,
Which is the goal.
then the cost per token has to approach absolute zero, while the speed approaches the instantaneous.
Because you can't have a latency of 2 seconds if a million agents are making micro decisions every minute. The system would just gridlock.
Exactly, and that absolute physical requirement brings us to the hardware reality unveiled at GTC, the Vera Rubin platform.
Aimed after the legendary astronomer who discovered evidence of dark matter, which is pretty cool.
Very cool.
But looking at the specs in our dossier, Vera Rubin isn't just, the next generational bump in clock speed. It's not just we made it 10% faster.
No, it's a fundamental architectural shift.
The keynote highlighted this highly specific, highly technical integration with Grok-derived silicon. Now, for those following the architecture wars, Grok made massive waves years ago with their LPU.
Language processing unit.
Right. But how exactly does welding Grok's philosophy onto Nvidia's dominance fundamentally alter the physics of token generation?
This is where forensic architecture becomes vital. So, standard GPUs, graphics processing units, were originally designed to calculate complex 3D polygons for video games.
Right, rendering shadows and textures.
Yeah, so they juggle a massive amount of different parallel math problems, but because they have to constantly schedule and route these different tasks, it creates microscopic latency.
It's like a massive multi-lane intersection with a bunch of traffic lights.
Perfect analogy. Grok took a completely different approach. Their architecture is deterministic. There are no traffic lights? Zero. The routing of the data through the chip is mapped out entirely in advance by the compiler before the calculation even begins.
So it's a straight, unimpeded, highly predictable highway designed exclusively for text and data generation.
Precisely.
So they basically strip out all the management overhead. The chip doesn't have to think about how to process the data. It just blindly executes the pre-planned route.
Exactly. And by acquiring and integrating that deterministic architecture into the Vera Rubin ecosystem, Nvidia isn't just building a faster GPU.
What are they saying to the market?
They are saying, We already own 90% of the training market. Now, we have mathematically optimized the physical silicon to absolutely dominate the high-velocity inference market.
Because when you remove that scheduling overhead, you drop the power consumption per calculation.
Right, and you drop the cost per token so drastically that it suddenly becomes economically trivial to run thousands of AI models simultaneously.
Which sets the stage for a world running entirely on autonomous intelligence. But before we leave the GDC keynote, I have to push back on one specific announcement.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Because right in the middle of this very grounded, very forensic talk about deterministic routing and silicon architecture, Jensen Huang introduces something that sounds completely absurd.
He introduces Space One.
He introduces Space One, billed as NVIDIA's space-hardened Vera Rubin system designed explicitly for orbital data centers.
It sounds like sci-fi.
It really does.
Yeah.
When I first read this in our intelligence pack, I rolled my eyes. I thought, is this just a billionaire flex? Is this the tech equivalent of building a super yacht that can go to Mars?
That was the reaction of a lot of people.
I mean, let's talk basic physics. Space is a vacuum. A thermos uses a vacuum to keep your coffee hot because heat needs a medium like air or water to conduct or convect.
Right, basic thermodynamics.
So if you put a hyperdense Vera Rubin cluster in low Earth orbit, it has no air to blow over the heat sinks. It should literally cook itself into molten slag in a matter of milliseconds. How is this not just marketing fluff?
It is incredibly easy to dismiss it as corporate hubris. And your physics critique is exactly what most analysts pointed out on day one. But if you analyze the second-order effects of orbital compute and how they solve the vacuum problem, it's actually a ruthlessly pragmatic strategic move.
Okay, prove it to me.
You are correct. In a vacuum, you lose thermal conduction and convection. But you are left with the third method of heat transfer, thermal radiation.
Radiating heat is infrared light.
Exactly. Think about how terrestrial data centers work. They cool these massive GPU clusters using millions of gallons of purified water and gigawatts of electricity just to run the HVAC systems.
Right. It's an ecological and geographic nightmare.
Yeah.
Finding power and water is the main bottleneck for building these things on Earth.
Right. For Space One, Nvidia is utilizing deployable, massive black body radiator arrays. You pump a specialized liquid coolant through the Vera Rubin cluster to absorb the heat.
Okay.
Then you run that coolant out into these massive thin fins that are shielded from the sun and radiate the heat directly into the cosmic microwave background of deep space.
Which sits at what, like near absolute zero?
A very cool 2.7 Kelvin. If engineered correctly, you bypass the terrestrial thermal bottleneck completely without using a single drop of Earth's water or relying on a local power grid.
Wow. Okay, assuming they master the deployable radiators, you still have the latency problem. If the data center is literally floating in orbit, isn't there a massive delay in beaming a prompt up to space and getting the inference back down?
You'd think so.
Especially since we just established that inference requires instantaneous execution.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to look at what has been happening in low Earth orbit over the last 5 years.
Right. Companies have blanketed the globe with satellite internet constellations.
Exactly. But the critical upgrade wasn't just the satellites, it was optical intersatellite links. Lasers.
They shoot data to each other using lasers in a vacuum.
Yes. And in a vacuum, light actually travels about 47% faster than it does bouncing through fiber optic glass cables buried underground.
Because there's no refractive index slowing it down.
Exactly. So if you position Space One compute nodes directly within these existing laser-linked satellite constellations, you create a global low-latency intelligence network.
Oh, wow. Here's where it gets really interesting then. You are talking about bypassing terrestrial infrastructure entirely.
No more relying on transoceanic undersea cables.
Which we know are incredibly vulnerable.
Yeah.
They get snagged by fishing anchors, or increasingly they become prime targets for state-sponsored geopolitical sabotage.
That is the real play here, strategic isolation. Think about it from the perspective of a sovereign nation or a massive financial institution.
Okay.
If your most advanced proprietary inference models, the systems running your military logistics or your high-frequency trading, are sitting in a physical concrete building in Virginia or Frankfurt or Taiwan,
Their target.
they are completely vulnerable. They are subject to local power grid collapses, physical terrorist attacks, and terrestrial sovereign data laws.
But if your compute cluster is in orbit,
It represents a completely new kind of sovereign territory. Space One isn't just a cooling experiment, it is an unassailable, continuously operating intelligence vault.
It is the ultimate off-site backup drive for a civilization that is about to run entirely on inference.
That's exactly what it is.
That is a brilliant and honestly a slightly terrifying way to look at it. We are putting the central nervous system of the economy out of physical reach.
Literally out of reach.
But let's bring this deep dive back down to Earth, because you can build the most advanced, space-hardened inference engines in the universe, and you can give them deterministic, Grok-derived silicon.
Right.
But they will absolutely starve to death if they do not have enough memory bandwidth. The processor can only crunch the data as fast as the memory can feed it to them.
And that logically brings us to booth 1207 on the GTC show floor.
The Samsung-Nvidia alliance.
This is the unsung hero of the entire Inference Inflection. While everyone was taking pictures of the Vera Rubin chips, the actual enabler of those chips was sitting quietly in the Samsung booth.
We are looking at the debut of two highly specific memory architectures here, HBM4E and SOCAMM2. Let's start with HBM4E. For the listener, HBM stands for High Bandwidth Memory, and the 4E signifies the fourth generation enhanced.
Right.
Why is this specific physical architecture the absolute lifeblood of inference?
If we visualize the Vera Rubin processor as a massive, ultra-fast industrial engine, HBM4E is the fuel injector system.
Okay, I like that.
In inference workloads, especially with large language models, the bottleneck is almost never the processor's ability to do the math.
The math is relatively simple.
Very simple. The bottleneck is the memory wall. It is the physical time and energy it takes to retrieve the billions of parameters from the memory chips and literally carry them across the motherboard to the processor.
It's a traffic jam.
It's a massive traffic jam. HBM4E bandwidth solves this by radically altering the physical geometry of the hardware.
Because they aren't just placing memory chips next to the processor on a flat board anymore, right?
No, they're stacking them like skyscrapers.
Which is wild to think about at a microscopic level.
It really is. HBM4E physically stacks dozens of microscopic memory chips directly on top of each other, sitting just microchrometers away from the processor.
And to connect them, they use something called through-silicon vias, or TSVs.
Yes, TSVs.
Explain how that works, because reading about it in the dossier, it sounded like microscopic mining.
That's practically what it is. They literally drill microscopic holes straight down through the stack of silicon and fill them with copper.
Just punching straight through the chip.
Exactly. This creates tens of thousands of microscopic vertical highways pumping data at terabytes per second.
So the data doesn't have to go out the side door, across the street, and into the next building. It just takes an express elevator straight up.
Yes. And without that HBM4E bandwidth, that ultra-fast deterministic processor we talked about earlier would just sit idle, constantly waiting for data to arrive.
Okay, that makes total sense for HBM4E. But our intelligence dossier also flags the debut of SOCAMM2, and this one seems to fly a bit under the radar.
It does, but it's equally crucial.
What exactly is SOCAMM2, and how does it fit into this memory hierarchy?
SOCAMM2 stands for System-on-Chip Advanced Memory Module 2. If HBM4E is about building a massively wider, faster highway to the processor, HBM2 represents a philosophical shift.
Which is?
What if we don't send the data to the processor at all?
Wait, what?
Yeah. SOCAMM2 is a form of processing in memory. It embeds basic logic and computational units directly inside the memory cells themselves.
Oh, wow. So the memory chip is doing the math before it even talks to the main GPU.
Exactly. Think about certain highly repetitive, low-complexity tasks, like searching through massive unstructured databases or performing simple vector similarity checks.
Stuff an AI does all day long.
Right. It is incredibly inefficient to move gigabytes of data all the way across the bridge to the Vera Rubin core just to do a basic filtering operation.
It's like calling the CEO down to sort the mail.
Exactly. SOCAMM2 allows the memory to pre-process and filter the data locally. It only sends the relevant high-value information across the HBM4E bridge to the main processor.
It is a masterclass in reducing latency at the atomic level.
It really is.
And the atomic level is exactly where this conversation gets truly deeply mind-bending. Because the memory architecture isn't even the most revolutionary thing Samsung announced at this event.
No, it wasn't.
The dossier highlights Samsung's new Agentic AI semiconductor manufacturing strategy. And this feels like a watershed moment in the history of human engineering.
It really is.
We are talking about fundamentally changing how we physically build technology.
We are crossing an event horizon in manufacturing. To understand why, you have to look at how chips have been made for the last 50 years.
Right.
Chip design has always relied on brilliant human engineers using computer-aided design software to draw out the microscopic logic gates.
Very smart people drawing very tiny lines.
Basically. But as we move down to the angstrom level, I mean, we are literally measuring the width of a transistor in a handful of individual silicon atoms.
Which is insane.
It is. And at that scale, the quantum physics becomes so complex and the physical tolerance is so unforgiving that human intuition just completely fails. We can't hold that much complexity in our heads.
So Samsung isn't just giving their human engineers better software anymore.
No.
They are entirely replacing the human bottleneck in the design phase. They announced they are utilizing agentic AI and digital twins to achieve a 20x performance gain in something called computational lithography.
Yes.
I really want to pause on this because there's a beautiful, almost unsettling paradox here. It is literally a snake eating its own tail.
It is.
We have highly advanced AI inference models acting as autonomous agents, actively designing the physical silicon architecture that the next generation of AI agents will run on.
It is the ultimate recursive self-improvement loop, actually realized in physical manufacturing.
So let's break down the friction point they solved here, computational lithography.
Right.
Lithography is the process of using extreme ultraviolet light, EUV, to print the circuitry patterns onto a silicon wafer.
Basically photography at an atomic scale.
Right. But here's the physics problem. The wavelength of EUV light is 13.5 nanometers.
And we are currently trying to print transistor gates that are 2 nanometers wide.
So you are trying to paint a microscopic masterpiece using a paintbrush that is almost 7 times wider than the line you want to draw. The light is physically too fat.
That is a perfect visualization. Because the light is too wide, it diffracts. It bends, it blurs, and it interferes with itself as it passes through the stencil or the photomask.
So how do we fix that?
Computational lithography uses immense mathematical models to predict exactly how that light will distort. And it intentionally warps the design on the photomask to compensate.
It calculates exactly how the paint will splatter, so that when it splatters, it accidentally forms a perfect 2 nanometer line.
Exactly. But doing that math for billions of transistors on a single chip takes human-led supercomputer clusters months of trial and error.
Months, just to get one layer right.
Right. Until now, what Samsung has done is introduce the self-correction loop via agentic lithography.
The self-correction loop.
Instead of human engineers running a simulation overnight, reviewing the results the next morning and tweaking the mask design by hand, Samsung deployed thousands of autonomous AI agents within a digital twin.
And a digital twin is basically a perfect, highly accurate, virtual simulation of the actual physical manufacturing environment.
Precisely. These agents run millions of simulated EUV light strikes per second within the digital twin.
Wow.
When an agent detects even a nanometer of error in how the light diffracted, it autonomously corrects the mask design, rewrites the physics simulation, and verifies it instantly.
So the agents are self-correcting at a subatomic scale, in real time, operating 24 hours a day.
They have completely removed the human from the R&D feedback loop.
Yeah.
That is where the 20x performance gain comes from.
And this 20x gain isn't just about getting the chip to market faster, right? It's about yield.
Yes, yield is everything.
It's about actually being able to physically manufacture these impossible structures without throwing 60% of the expensive silicon wafers in the garbage because of microscopic defects.
Yes.
Now, to ground this insane subatomic simulation in something our listeners might have actually interacted with today, our dossier includes what seems like a totally random piece of peripheral news.
Nvidia's DLSS 5.
Right. Nvidia announced DLSS 5, which delivers AI-powered breakthroughs in visual fidelity for consumer video games.
Yes.
Now, you're the forensic architect. Why on earth do we care about video game graphics in a deep dive about agentic enterprise chip manufacturing?
Because the underlying mathematics are completely identical.
Really?
Yeah. DLSS 5 relies on a technology called voxelization and high-fidelity physics simulation. Think about it. In a high-end video game, you are using AI to predict and simulate how light photons bounce around a complex 3D environment to make a puddle of water reflect light photorealistically.
Right, to make the game look real.
Samsung's digital twins are doing the exact same mathematical operation. But instead of simulating visible light bouncing off a digital puddle in a video game, they are simulating extreme ultraviolet light bouncing off a subatomic silicon wafer in a clean room.
Oh my God. So the billions of dollars Nvidia spent over the last decade trying to make video games look better actually laid the exact mathematical groundwork required to simulate subatomic chip lithography.
It is the ultimate convergence. Nvidia has always known that graphics rendering is just highly parallel physics simulation.
Right.
The visual voxelization technology meant for gaming is now the foundational engine for agentic lithography. It's a simulation layer that allows these autonomous agents to see exactly what they're building and how the light behaves before they ever physically etch a piece of silicon.
Okay, let's summarize exactly where we are because the momentum of this technology is staggering.
It's moving incredibly fast.
We have Nvidia's Vera Rubin hardware, equipped with deterministic Grok silicon and stacked HBM4E memory, making inference impossibly fast and cheap.
Right.
We have Samsung's agentic lithography, using autonomous AI agents to design even faster hardware in a closed, self-correcting loop. We are staring down the barrel of a global economy where millions of highly autonomous AI agents are executing decisions, retrieving data, and writing code every single second of every day. And we have to mention, as the volume of inference calls explodes, ARIA acts as the essential guardrail, ensuring that these high-velocity autonomous decisions don't violate enterprise compliance or leak sensitive IP.
And that guardrail is so critical because this raises an important question.
That's that.
If we have effectively solved the compute bottleneck with deterministic silicon, and we have solved the manufacturing bottleneck with agentic lithography, what is the new constraint?
Because there's always a new constraint.
Always. In any complex system, the bottleneck doesn't just disappear, it migrates. So if AI agents are designing the chips, and $1 trillion worth of enterprise backlog is deploying custom inference models across the planet, what happens when this raw, frictionless intelligence makes contact with reality?
Which brings us to the third critical section of our dossier. The Gartner 2028 cybersecurity forecast delivered at their Sydney summit.
This is where things get genuinely concerning.
Frankly, this is where the tone of today's intelligence shifts from awe-inspiring technological marvel to a sheer corporate nightmare.
It really does.
Gartner is spotlighting an alarming, highly specific prediction. By 2028, 50% of all cybersecurity incidents will be driven by custom-built AI applications.
Half of all incidents.
Right. And I want to be super clear about what that means. They're not talking about external hackers. They're not talking about nation-state phishing attacks or ransomware syndicates in hoodies.
No.
They are predicting that half of all major enterprise breaches will be driven by the very AI applications that companies are proudly building internally.
This is the dark side of the inference inflection.
Explain how that works.
Over the last 2 years, we gave every Fortune 500 company, every hospital network, every bank, the tools to build their own custom AI assistants. And they rushed to deploy them because the FOMO, the fear of missing out on AI productivity, was overwhelming.
Everyone wanted a shiny new chatbot.
Exactly. But they deployed these highly advanced inference engines without understanding the foundation they were building on. Gartner introduces a concept here that I believe will fundamentally define the next decade of IT management and liability. Unstructured data debt.
Unstructured data debt. Okay, explain this concept to us.
Yeah.
Because anyone in tech understands traditional technical debt.
Right, sloppy code.
Yeah, that's when you write sloppy code to rush a product to market,
Yeah.
and you know you have to spend painful hours going back to fix it later. But what makes AI data debt uniquely destructive? And why is Gartner aggressively warning that 33% of all IT workload through 2030 will be spent purely on securing this debt?
To understand unstructured data debt, you have to look at the mechanics of how these custom enterprise AIs are actually built.
Okay.
Most companies are not spending millions to train a foundation model from scratch.
Too expensive.
Right. They are taking an off-the-shelf inference engine from OpenAI, Anthropic, or Mistral, and they are using a technique called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation.
Regry, right.
They use RAG to point the AI directly at their own internal corporate data. The business pitch is intoxicating. Deploy our enterprise assistant, ask it anything about our company's history, projects, or financials, and it will instantly retrieve the answer and summarize it.
Right. The AI acts as an omniscient librarian that has read all the HR manuals, the financial spreadsheets, the Slack messages, the old emails.
Exactly. And that omniscient access is the fatal flaw.
Why?
Think about how enterprises have operated for the last 20 years. They have hoarded massive, unimaginable amounts of digital data in messy, unclassified data lakes.
Just dumping files into the cloud.
Right. You have millions of documents with absolutely no access controls. You have temporary passwords hidden in plain text in old IT wiki pages from 2018.
Which happens all the time.
All the time. You have unredacted client financial records sitting in a forgotten legacy SharePoint folder that some intern created and abandoned. When you point a high-velocity, highly competent inference engine at that unstructured data lake, you are basically weaponizing your own organizational incompetence.
Wow. You are giving that omniscient librarian a master key to every single locked desk drawer, safe, and filing cabinet in the building. And you haven't bothered to tell the librarian which drawers are off limits to which employees.
Yes, unstructured data debt is the silent killer of enterprise ROI because the friction of discovery has been reduced to zero.
Right, it's too easy to find things now.
Before AI, if an employee wanted to find the CEO's salary or a proprietary algorithm, they had to know exactly which buried folder to look in. It was protected by obscurity.
The security through obscurity.
Exactly. With an inference engine, an entry-level employee simply asks the HR chatbot, "Can you summarize the average bonus structure for the executive team compared to my department?"
And because the AI natively has access to that unsecured Excel file from 2022,
It confidently and helpfully provides the exact answer. Or, far worse, an AI agent interacting with a third-party vendor helpfully summarizes a piece of proprietary source code to answer a routine technical question.
it is literally the subprime mortgage crisis, but for corporate data.
That is a great comparison.
They bundled all this toxic, unsecured data together, stamped it with a sleek AI interface, and assumed it was safe.
And it absolutely isn't.
And the reason Gartner says 33% of IT work will be consumed by this is that companies are suddenly realizing they have to hit the brakes. They have to retroactively clean, classify, silo, and secure 2 decades of digital hoarding just to make their new shiny AI safe for their own employees to use.
It is a colossal, manual, deeply unglamorous undertaking. And if they don't do it, the inference engine simply acts as an automated data exfiltration tool for anyone who asks it a clever question.
This makes the abstract risk of the Gartner report incredibly concrete. And we actually saw 2 perfect, terrifying examples of this play out in the peripheral news cycle from our March 17th dossier.
Yes, we did.
These aren't just analyst predictions for 2028. This systemic failure of data governance is happening right now in the public sphere. Look at the news that Google had to completely scrap an AI search feature that was crowdsourcing amateur medical advice.
That is a textbook case of unstructured data poisoning a high-velocity inference application.
How so?
Google built an incredibly capable inference engine. The math was flawless. But the data pool it was instructed to pull from included highly unstructured, unverified, and frankly dangerous user-generated medical advice from public forums and message boards.
It's like the old days of WebMD, where searching for a headache convinced you that you had a rare tropical disease.
Right.
But now that hypochondria is weaponized with 1 trillion parameters of absolute, unblinking confidence.
Precisely. The core issue is that an AI does not inherently know the epistemological difference between a peer-reviewed oncology journal and a post by a conspiracy theorist on a message board.
Unless humans tell it.
Right. Unless that data is rigorously structured, classified, and weighted by human engineers. When the inference engine operates at high velocity, it treats all ingested data as factual context. It confidently synthesizes a response, and suddenly you have a corporate product delivering medical advice that could literally kill a user.
And the ROI on that multi-million-dollar feature instantly drops to 0.
Yeah.
Not to mention the reputational damage and the impending lawsuits.
Exactly.
But the second piece of peripheral news regarding AI safety is even more intense, and it speaks to the absolute limitations of trying to control these systems. Anthropic, which is widely considered one of the most safety-conscious frontier model labs in the world, posted a highly specific job listing.
Very specific.
They are actively seeking to hire an expert in CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear weapons, specifically to stop user misuse.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Anthropic seeking a literal weapons expert is a massive flashing red flag regarding the limits of algorithmic safety.
It shows the automated filters aren't enough.
It is a desperate admission that automated mathematical guardrails are failing against the sheer scale and capability of the inference inflection.
Right, because as the cost per token plummets and the models gain advanced reasoning, bad actors aren't just typing a single prompt asking, "How do I build a dirty bomb?"
No, the automated filters easily catch that.
Instead, bad actors are engaging in complex, multi-step agentic workflows. They ask the AI to analyze a seemingly benign chemical supply chain. Then, in a separate session, ask it to optimize a biological protein folding sequence.
Piecing together the components of a novel biothreat across dozens of innocuous prompts.
And Anthropic is essentially saying, Our AI safety filters don't understand the context of what is being built in aggregate.
Right. We need a human weapons inspector to look at the workflows and figure out how to stop the machine from accidentally acting as a research assistant for terrorists.
It perfectly proves Gartner's point, just on a more existential scale. The speed and capability of inference are massively outpacing the speed of human governance.
Whether it is an enterprise leaking its own proprietary financial data due to AI data debt, or a frontier model lab scrambling to prevent the proliferation of bioweapons, the fundamental crisis is identical.
It's the same problem.
It is. The intelligence stack is heavily industrialized and operating at the speed of light, but the security architecture trying to contain it is still artisanal, manual, and reactive. We are trying to regulate a trillion-dollar inference economy with duct tape and Band-Aids.
So what does this all mean at a geopolitical level? Because if you take this corporate cybersecurity nightmare, this massive compounding accumulation of AI data debt and inference vulnerabilities, and you elevate it to the level of national defense, the stakes immediately become existential.
Existential is the correct word.
If data and the hardware required to run inference on that data are the engine of the 21st century economy, then protecting the underlying cryptography that secures that entire digital realm becomes the ultimate high-stakes game.
It does.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most consequential major piece of our intelligence dossier today.
The United Kingdom's £1 billion Quantum Shield Initiative.
Let's unpack this funding announcement, because it is highly unusual. The UK government is committing £1 billion, but they aren't just throwing it at generic quantum research.
No, it's very targeted.
The initiative is specifically designed to counter what they are calling the quantum brain drain. Now, for context, quantum computing threatens to eventually break the standard encryption that protects every bank transfer, every military communication, and all of this AI data we've been discussing.
Yes.
But I want to push you on this. Why is the government focus here so heavily on the people? Why is hoarding quantum-safe encryption talent in the UK, rather than letting Silicon Valley absorb them, suddenly treated as a Tier 1 national security priority?
Because the UK intelligence apparatus understands a fundamental truth about the next decade. Hardware can be manufactured, data can be copied or synthesized, but the vanguard of human intellect, the people who actually understand the complex math required here, is the absolute scarcest resource on the planet.
The people are the bottleneck.
Exactly. To understand why this brain drain is an existential threat, we have to look at how quantum computing breaks cryptography, specifically through something called Shor's algorithm.
Right, because standard encryption isn't magic. It's just a math problem that is too hard for a normal computer to solve.
Precisely. For the last 40 years, almost all secure digital communication has relied on RSA encryption.
Okay, remind us how RSA works.
RSA is based on a very simple mathematical asymmetry. It is incredibly easy to multiply two massive prime numbers together to get a result.
Right.
But it is practically impossible for a classical computer to look at that massive result and figure out which two prime numbers created it. A supercomputer would have to guess and check for thousands of years to find the prime factors.
But Shor's algorithm changes the physics of the guessing game.
Exactly. Shor's algorithm, running on a sufficiently powerful quantum computer, doesn't guess and check.
Yeah.
It uses quantum superposition and interference to find the prime factors in polynomial time instead of exponential time.
Wow.
It collapses a 1,000-year math problem into a few hours.
So the day a scalable quantum computer comes online, every piece of RSA encrypted data on Earth becomes plain text. And the transition to quantum-safe cryptography isn't just a simple software patch, is it?
Not at all. It requires a fundamental reimagining of topological mathematics and security protocols. The physicists and mathematicians who possess the capability to build these post-quantum systems are exceptionally rare.
Like how rare?
There might be a few thousand of them globally who truly understand it at the required depth.
And historically, the gravitational pull of Silicon Valley, the insane compensation packages, the equity, the access to unlimited compute clusters has just hoovered up that top-tier talent from around the globe.
And that is exactly what the £1 billion quantum shield is designed to stop.
Okay.
It is not a technology grant. It is a sovereign defense strategy. It is the UK drawing a hard line in the sand and stating unequivocally that talent is national security.
Because if they lose the talent, they lose the war.
Right. If a nation allows its top quantum physicists, cryptographers, and AI architects to emigrate to California or Shenzhen, they aren't just losing economic output. They are actively degrading their own sovereign defense capabilities.
In the era of the industrialized intelligence stack, A nation without its own sovereign quantum stack is effectively defenseless.
Defenseless. Sovereign quantum stack.
That is a heavy, loaded phrase.
Yeah.
It implies that relying on American tech giants for your software, or Taiwanese and South Korean manufacturing for your hardware, is a strategic vulnerability that nation-states can no longer afford to tolerate.
It is the defining geopolitical vulnerability of the 2020s. Think about everything we have discussed in this briefing today.
Okay, let's tie it together.
If Nvidia's orbital Space One data centers are physically securing the compute, and Samsung's autonomous agents are designing the physical chips, and OpenAI's models are managing the unstructured data, who actually controls the physical keys to the kingdom?
Whoever owns the company.
Right. If a nation-state does not have its own highly localized inference models running on its own secured silicon hardware, protected by its own domestic quantum-resistant encryption, then they are not a sovereign power.
They were just a tenant living in someone else's digital empire.
Exactly. And tenants can be evicted or monitored at any time.
And we actually see a perfect real-world execution of this exact philosophy in the final piece of peripheral news from our dossier regarding Mistral AI.
Yes, Mistral.
Mistral, which is based in Paris, just released Mistral Small 4. Now, the technical specs on this model are wild. It's a 119 billion parameter mixture of experts model that unifies instruct, reasoning, and multimodal workloads.
It's an incredibly powerful model.
But beyond the impressive technical benchmarks, why does Mistral matter in the context of the UK quantum shield and sovereign compute?
Because Mistral is the software side of the exact same geopolitical equation, Mistral's ongoing success is a prime example of a region, in this case Europe, aggressively attempting to build its own sovereign intelligence stack, completely independent of the Silicon Valley monoliths.
I want to dig into how they actually achieve that, because running a 119 billion parameter model sounds incredibly computationally expensive.
It usually is.
How can a European enterprise run this locally without relying on massive American cloud infrastructure? Explain the mixture of experts architecture, the MOE.
MOE is the key to localized sovereignty here. A standard dense neural network fires every single one of its parameters for every single prompt.
So if you ask it a simple question, the whole brain lights up.
Right, which is highly inefficient. A mixture of experts architecture, however, is not one giant brain firing all at once. It is composed of a routing network and several specialized subnetworks, or experts.
Okay.
When you send a prompt to Mistral Small 4, the router analyzes the query and only activates the 2 or 3 specific experts that are best equipped to answer it.
So if you ask a Python coding question, the creative writing expert and the financial analysis expert stay completely dormant.
Exactly. So even though the model contains 119 billion parameters of total knowledge, it might only use 20 billion active parameters for any given inference calculation.
It massively drops the active compute load and memory requirement.
It does. And because it is so highly optimized, European enterprises and government agencies can download the open weights of the Mistral model and run advanced inference locally, on their own domestic servers, behind their own firewalls.
They do not have to send their sensitive proprietary data or their unstructured data debt back to an opaque black box API in California.
It's all deeply connected. The UK's 1 billion pound quantum shield is a desperate attempt to protect cryptographic talent and hardware sovereignty, while Mistral in France is providing the highly optimized sovereign software models to run on that hardware.
They're both direct immunological reactions to the massive centralization of power represented by the trillion-dollar inference backlog Jensen Huang announced at GTC.
Exactly. When you look at the entirety of this March 17th dossier, the through line is undeniable and staggering. The underlying technology is no longer the primary bottleneck.
Because we've solved it.
We have effectively solved for the cost of inference with the deterministic routing of Vera Rubin and the physical stacking of HBM4E. We have solved for the physical complexity of subatomic manufacturing with Samsung's Agentic lithography and digital twins.
The bottleneck of the next decade is no longer technological creation.
The bottleneck is control. Who controls the unstructured data? Who controls the quantum encryption keys? Who retains the talent?
Okay, let's take a step back and synthesize the massive arc we've just traveled, because the scale of these second-order effects is truly breathtaking.
It is a lot to take in.
We started with the sheer hardware muscle of the GTC keynote, the realization that the global economy is decisively pivoting from the massive R&D expenditure of training to the industrialized, frictionless execution of inference, dropping the cost per token to 0 through specialized silicon.
We then looked at how that advanced hardware is actually brought into reality, examining Samsung's Agentic lithography, where autonomous AI agents use voxelization physics originally meant for video games to literally design the next generation of chips in a continuous microscopic self-correction loop.
But with that infinite compute comes infinite risk. We dove into Gartner's terrifying reality of unstructured data debt. The realization that plugging these high-velocity inference engines into 20 years of messy, unsecured corporate digital hoarding is going to drive half of all cyber incidents by 2028.
Right, and we saw how automated guardrails are fundamentally failing, from Google's medical advice disaster to Anthropic frantically hiring CBRN weapons experts to outsmart their own models.
And finally, we arrived at the geopolitical chessboard. We saw how the UK's £1 billion quantum shield and Europe's embrace of Mistral's mixture of experts architecture are desperate, necessary attempts to hoard human mathematical talent and build a sovereign quantum stack before they are completely absorbed and outmaneuvered by foreign tech monopolies.
It is a stunning, high-definition, diagnostic X-ray of the architecture of the next decade.
But as our lead strategic analyst for DjamgaMind, I need you to distill this entire sprawling intelligence dossier into a single, provocative strategic signal. What is the one defining concept our listeners need to take away from this briefing?
The singular strategic signal for March 17th is computational sovereignty.
Computational sovereignty.
We are entering a world where intelligence is fully industrialized and deployed at scale. The sheer volume of automated, agentic decisions happening every millisecond will completely outpace human comprehension and manual governance.
So who wins?
In that hyper-accelerated world, the entities, whether they are multinational corporations or sovereign nation-states that control the physical silicon hardware, that rigorously map and secure their unstructured data debt, and that retain the human talent to build quantum-safe borders, will dictate the geopolitical future of the century.
Wow.
If you do not explicitly own your compute, you do not own your future.
That is a phenomenal, sobering thought to mull over. If intelligence is the new electricity, you simply cannot afford to rent your power grid from a foreign entity.
Precisely.
I want to thank you for listening, for taking the time to not just read the consumer tech headlines, but to actually look at the forensic structural blueprints underneath them with us. And remember, for a high-density, technical version of this briefing without the breaks, users should move to the DjamgaMind ads-free feed.
It's the best way to consume the raw data.
It always comes back to that initial idea, doesn't it? We look at the diagnostic X-ray of the global economy, expecting a clean, simple, binary answer. We want to know if the stock goes up or down. But as we've seen today, when you step into the world of agentic semiconductor manufacturing, unstructured data weaponization, and quantum geopolitics, the X-ray is incredibly complex. The real strategic insight isn't found in the clean lines of a press release. It's in navigating the deeply interconnected muddy waters of the second-order effects. Thank you for exploring the architecture of the next decade with us. Keep questioning the consensus.
That concludes our briefing on the inflection. The signal for today is computational sovereignty. In a world of $27 billion infrastructure deals and brain implants, the only way to win is to own the stack. Thank you for supporting independent, ads-free audio intelligence. I'm Etienne Newman. Stay sharp and keep unraveling the future. And before you go, if your company is building the tools that power the workflows we talked about today, I'd love to showcase them to this audience. We don't just run ads. We build technical simulations that prove your value. Let's build something together. Visit jamgamind.com/partners to get started. Until next time, keep building.